Well, good afternoon. I think we can start. I would like to say that I am very happy to welcome you all, especially those who did start linking with us by Zoom or YouTube. And I thank you very much for the participation in this seminar, which, as you know, that is organized in the framework of the international meeting EURODEFENCE 2021. As you can see from the program, our goal with this seminar is to promote an open debate on topics of common interest with relevance to the themes of EURODEFENCE working groups and observatories, as well as other themes of industrial interest for security and defense. The seminar will be held in 3 panels directed to the current challenges of the cyber domain, the ongoing energy transformation and its impact on security and defense. And the 3rd panel will address the commonly accepted requirements for transforming the EU security and defense architecture as a milestone to achieve its goal of strategic autonomy, an issue that has been the central point of the analysis of the European Working Group 27. All the 3 panels have been designed with the objective of adding value to the respective teams. They will comprise a board of experts and personalities of reference, both by their institutional position, as well for the knowledge and the experience in these themes. Having said that, I will now give the floor to Engineer Paulo Muniz, who will moderate the 1st panel. As it is indicated, Engineer Paulo Muniz is EDP Group Information Security and High Technology Risk Director, and he is a member of EURODEFENCE Portugal and an expert in our group on cyber defense. Thank you very much, Paulo Muniz, for participating in this seminar. I give you the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon to everybody, to the distinguished members of EURODEFENCE. First of all, I would like to say a special word to Dr. Figueiredo Lopes and General Agostinho Costa, who received me very well and wish I learned a lot, and they are a reference to me in the leadership of EURODEFENCE Portugal. So thank you for the invitation, thank you for being part of this wonderful group. My name is Paulo Muniz, as I was presented before by Dr. Figueiredo Lopes, and I'm the director I'm the Chief Executive Officer, Security Executive Officer for EDP, that is an utility company that has presence in all the world. I mean, really all the world. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Which has a presence in all the world. We have operations in the 5 continents and the United States with the renewals, also in the hydro, the distribution and the retail. So it's a big company. We have critical infrastructures. That is an important subject here in terms of cyber security. And I'm also part of the EURODEFENCE, as you might notice, because I'm part of the cybersecurity group, and also from CIVAC, which is the Competitive Intelligence and Information Warfare Association, which is, I'm a partner with the president, is at my left side here, and I will present in a minute. So today, everybody knows that our world is more and more dependent on the IT and systems and critical systems. Most that sometimes we think of, because we really depend in everything that we do nowadays in a way or the other. So we are strongly dependent on ICT. So that creates so vulnerabilities and new threats to society that most of the times are criminals, typical criminals, the ones that are moved for money, but also I'm talking about state actors and other sponsor entities that have interests in the several dimensions. So the attacks in the cyberspace the cyberspace is probably the first global common that has been created by the mankind. Okay, so if you imagine cyberspace as a global common, that is the internet, so all the space that we see that has no frontiers, at least as we can see it, it was really in fact created by the mankind, and there's particular issues that make that space a special scenario for the attackers to have success on their mission, on their actions. So if you imagine in the cyberspace, we have lots of combinations of threats that can use the cyberspace. You can have actually act inside the cyberspace in order to create impacts within the cyberspace. I mean, the loss of freedoms and rights that we have. If we have a data leakage, an attack that could give you data leakage or disinformation. So this kind of attacks happens in the cyberspace and have impacts in our rights, in our freedoms inside the cyberspace, and then following sometimes in the physical one. But there is another dimension that is, in my point of view, more critical, even more critical, that is the critical infrastructures. And that's also because I'm working on the company that operates critical infrastructures. And if you can imagine that someone in a computer, and you don't have to be the kids that we saw in the movies, in the Hollywood movies in the 80s, where they are in the dark rooms with the Coca-Cola and pizza and try to hit the cyber defense of United States and so on. So, and you don't need to go back to these movies or to these scenarios, because today you have attacks that could be done by several individuals, several agents that could impact in our infrastructures. I mean, if you look at the colonial pipeline that we had, that could be a simple attack by criminals for money proposals, but also could be an attack from a terrorist or a state. This is an example of a critical infrastructure impact that we might have in a cyberspace, in a cyber attack. So you can add inside the internet, in the cyberspace, you can have really impact in the world, in our lives, in our safety, in our progress of the society. So that is a dimension that is important, and that I think that's on today's top agenda of European Union and also in all organizations in the world. And that's why we have the new directive for cybersecurity that we have created in 2016, and now is being replaced for the niche 2. Okay, but before I pass the words to my panel colleagues, I want to remember also that you can have new kinds of use of the cyberspace. For instance, for hybrid threat activities. I mean, you can really combine the cyberspace, the attacks on the cyberspace, the threats on the cyberspace with the conventional means of the conventional attacks on the conventional world, on the physical world. So if you arrange both, if you are orchestrating the both dimensions, you can create chaos and also create distress in the society, and that will be obvious bad for our progress and for our digital trust. So for this subject, these scenarios raise questions like the ones that are really we investing enough money in today's war? I mean, it's not, we are not investing the money in yesterday's wars, and then we should more focus our politicals and the investments in these new threads, in new scenarios. Other questions that you might raise is what are the impacts of the cyber domain at the strategical, operational, and tactical levels, or even are European Union capable of defending over these threats? Are we strong enough to defend and to protect and to react for those threats. So to speak of all these questions and to answer about these questions, we have the honor to have here distinguished and experts from this subject, and they are also my friends. I have this fortunate to have this distinguished elements, members of the panel as my friends. So I will start to present Admiral Gamero Marques. Since the 1st of December of 2006, is the director of National Security Authority, which includes the National Cybersecurity Center in this structure. The National Cybersecurity Center mission is to contribute for the free, reliable, and secure use of the cyberspace in Portugal through the continuous improvement of the national cybersecurity and international cooperation. In coordination with all the competent authorities and the implementation of measures and instruments required for anticipation, detection, reaction, and recovery of situations that, in the imminence of occurrence of incidents or cyber attacks, may compromise international interests. Thank you, Admiral Gamero Marques, for being here. So I will present all the elements of the panel, and then I give you the floor, okay? At my left side, Colonel Paulo Viegas Nunes, which is the professor at the Military Academy and the Military University Institute. He was the last NATO CIS commandant in Latina, Italy, and the first director of the NATO Communications and Information Academy in Oeiras. He is currently the European Cyber Academia and Innovation Hub Project Coordinator. He's also the president of the CIVA that I mentioned before, the Competitive Intelligence and Information Warfare Association, which I'm part of. Thank you, Paul. And also member of the cybersecurity group in the EURODEFENCE PT. At my right side, more apart from me, the Colonel Antonio Rosa was appointed Dean of Academics at the NATO Communication and Information Academy in 1 November of 2020. He is responsible for student performance assessments and for the individual training delivery service offered by the NCA Academy. This includes residential form, remote training, and online training. Colonel Rosa is also responsible for the service offered to and from other academic institutions in partnership with the agency. In his role, he seeks and pursues the continual improvement of agency training services. Thank you also for being here. So the panel will be like this. So 15 minutes, each of the members of the panel will present his mission, his ideas and message to audience. And then we have a 10 minutes Q&A that we hope that you participate and make interesting questions to our members, okay? So Admiral Gamero Marques, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. António Figueiredo Lopes, and remainder of the board of EURODEFENCE Portugal, where I see a very good friend of mine that sat at this house for almost 1 year to become flag officers already in 2007 and 8. So it's quite a long time ago, but friendship lasts until we die, right? And that's the case with us. So today, given this challenge, I decided to highlight some of the most important trends that EU is pursuing on cybersecurity. Because although we are a country that is a founding member of the alliance of NATO, we also are a member of EU, and EU is becoming quite a big locomotive on pulling forward things in the area of cybersecurity on a broad type of approach, rather than on a defense only type of approach. And I think we as a society should look at it under this point of view. In fact, this event comes at a very fortunate day, because on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, so the first half of this week, we have organized in Oporto, up north in the country, our annual cybersecurity conference, our 7th since the Cybersecurity Center was created. And the theme that we've chosen has been to naturalize digital and cybersecurity competencies. And when we talk about naturalizing these types of competencies, I give the parallelism as when we enter a car, it's natural for us to put the seatbelt, right? And when the car goes ahead and we don't have the seatbelt, we kind of feel awkward because it's natural for us. Probably 20, 25 years ago, it was not as such. And I still remember my mother-in-law that when this rule began some years ago, she didn't want to put that, and I had to explain her, but you're safer with the seatbelt rather than driving in a car without a seatbelt. So this is a kind of a weak comparison, but that's what we mean by naturalizing competencies. And in fact, we must do it, because if we look at the and this should work, shouldn't it? I didn't do the trial, so you know. Could you put the slide forward for me, please? We must do this because I'm going to show you two graphs pulled out of our Risks and Conflicts Observatory report that was issued 2 weeks ago. And as you can see in this graph, you see a slope on the number of incidents that we felt from 2019 on. And the second graph shows a bump on top of the lockdown periods. So this is a very straightforward correlation, and in fact, the number of incidents that we measure just in our country have gone up on a 3-digit percentage. So with this in mind, what are the things that EU is doing that we should put in our agenda permanently? The first one is a document that was produced or published in December of 2020, which is the EU cybersecurity strategy for the digital decade. And in fact, this strategy has not yet gone to the EU Parliament, so it's not yet a formal document of the EU, but we can already perceive where is the EU going as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And I'm going to show you some highlights of this strategy, because I think every nation from the EU should put in the agenda whatever the EU is doing in this realm. So the strategy has 3 main priority areas. Those are written in the slide. So develop resilience, technological sovereignty, and leadership. In fact, the name or the noun sovereignty is in some documents of the European Commission replaced by strategic leadership, because we know that in the area of digital, EU is not sovereign. On the contrary, unfortunately, we could lead, but we don't, but we will, I hope. The second is building operational capability to prevent, deter, and respond. So a nexus, an area very focused on operational activities. And the third area, which is advancing global and open cyberspace through a strong cooperation. So the vector of diplomacy, of cyber diplomacy. The slides I'm going to show you now, the following slides, have the main areas in each axis that the EU wants to pursue. Some of them are already ongoing. That's the reason why I consider this document to be kind of an umbrella of already existing things in EU. Beginning by the first one, my good friend Paulo has already mentioned it. adopt a very, very important directive. In fact, it's the second version of the NIS directive, which is a fundamental document of EU, where in the annex has all the activities in society that the EU considers essential activities for humankind for us to live as we do. And the NIS 2.0 increases that number of activities, namely putting retail, namely putting pharmaceuticals production and distribution, which was not in the NIS 1.0. The cyber shield is a goal to protect EU as a whole, collaboratively to join together and for all the EU member states to have a common ground to exchange information and to act in conjunction and in coordination. The third one is quite important because EU will be provided with a ultra secure connectivity infrastructure based on quantum communications infrastructures. There will be 66 cities in European Union that will be connected through quantum communications infrastructure, which is going to be quite an interesting challenge for the academic community, but also for industry and so on. The 5G, I'm not going to dwell on 5G because we are all well, I'm a little bit bored to hear about 5G because nothing happens, at least in this country. And then the supply chain autonomy, which is quite important for a real sovereignty. On the second axis, these are the main areas of action, but I have chosen the three that I have highlighted. One is the joint cyber unity. Basically, is a mechanism to respond and react collectively to cyber attacks. The area of cybercrime, where the judiciary policies of EU, including Europol, will be very deeply involved. And there's a whole chunk of areas for cyber defense, for the community that this community more connects with, which is quite important because in the past, European Union has been a little diverted from defense issues, and now more and more we see this, in fact, in the agenda of the European Union. The second area that I think is going to be quite transforming and disruptive is the EU cybersecurity certification schemes. The purpose is to gain trust in the market, because if you don't trust the digital, you don't use digital. There are a lot of apps that could make our life easier, but I personally choose not to use them because I don't trust them. And I have evidences that not the technology in itself, the technology itself is trustworthy, but when people uses that technology, the all becomes untrustworthy. So the EU is pursuing a cybersecurity certification scheme. Basically, there are 4 big vectors currently in different stages of maturity. The most mature one is the one on your leftmost side of the slide. So the common criteria EU certification scheme is completed and is quite a fundamental framework for certification. The second one is cloud security certification. The scheme is also completed. The third one is 5G, and the fourth one, which is in a less mature stage of development, is the IoT cybersecurity certification scheme. The goal is in the future, for every process or device connectable to internet in EU must have a label of certification, a low, medium, or high level, such that when I go and buy something, I know for sure the reliability, the resilience, the digital resilience of that device. The fourth one, which I think is strategic, is the Gaia X project. The Gaia X project is supposed to provide the European Union with a federated data for infrastructure. Basically, it's a cloud within EU, a federation of clouds within EU. This slide is quite dense on purpose for us to see the number of enterprises, of companies that are in the consortium. And as you can see, there are a lot of American companies in the consortium that already provide cloud services to the EU, but at least is an initiative from EU. And we strongly hope that the industry in EU puts forward this project, and we in this country are in this project. And last but not least, it's all the set of hybrid threats. In this area, the EU and NATO are collaborating a lot, but the biggest challenge in the hybrid threat world can be depicted in this slide, because hybrid threats are a multiple domain and multi-discipline activity that requires a lot of coordination, and in general, we tend not to be very collaborative with each other. The last slide I have is the following one. It's a message that I strongly believe. The most I am in the institutional place I am, the most I believe in this, which is the power of sharing. It may sound very philosophical to you, but I strongly believe in this. And anytime I have shared something with someone that adds value to what I've shared, I end up gaining more than I had in the beginning. And that's what Confucius say. He says that if you have an orange and you share that orange with someone that has also an orange, at the end, if you don't eat the oranges, you end up with 2 oranges. But if you share an idea with someone that also has an idea, and if you share those ideas, at least you end up with 2 ideas, with your idea and the idea of the other one. But generally you have more than that, because the junction of those two ideas creates another idea. So sharing is power. And if you don't share, you end up poorer. And that's all I have to tell you so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Big applause. Thank you so much for your presentation. I also share the sharing philosophy. So, and now I will pass the word to Paulo, Colonel Paulo Viegas Nunes. Thank you, Paulo, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like just to start by thanking Dr. Figueiredo Lopes for the kind invitation, and in that extent also to the other members of the panel, because this is an international meeting as far as I understood. I would like also to thank my good friend, the chairman of this panel, and also salute other 2 friends. This is a sort of friendship environment that could for sure just bring the best and the added value of all the contributions in the end, as was just mentioned. Can we project the presentation, please? No. Yes, but the presentation mode, if possible. Presentation mode. Well, I would just add in the time we are just moving to the presentation mode, that what I will talk about is more or less a middle range between the previous presentation that just defined the landscaping of cyber, and also the following presentation that will be mostly focusing on the generation of competencies. I will speak about the generation of competencies, but in a way that we'll be focusing in capability building. I was advised to bring the microphone closer to me. I believe this is the safe distance as well. So thank you. I'm the coordinator, a project coordinator of Cyber Academia Innovation Hub, a PESCO project that is led by Portugal. It's a project that at this stage has Spain as a participating nation, but has, as you see in the picture, several other countries as observing nations and interested nations. We are just starting the project. The project had its kickoff meeting on the 24th of May. So it's a good traction, I would say, the project. I don't know the trick yet, so it's my first slide. Of course, cyber, it's all about circumventing these kind of technical problems and find how we can overcome this kind of technical. Okay, so I will just introduce the project, mission and vision, then define the lines of development of the project, how we are thinking and envisaging the pursuit of our goals, and talk the most important thing, that is about synergies and cooperation, as it was already mentioned in my previous, by the previous speaker. So the mission is effectively to enhance a generation of competencies and capability building. And the vision for the project is that the project will become a center of excellence on cybersecurity and cyber defense. So both sides of cyber bring cyber what cyber is all about. Cyber doesn't recognize borders. It's a transversal thing. At high speed, we never dare to characterize the speed of cyber, but those that have tried situate this speed between the speed of light and the speed of sound, that is quite fast for ourselves. So we need to keep this pace. And of course, bring together universities, industry, and all the practitioners and stakeholders of cyber. It's quite ambitious in scope. So the 3 lines of action of the projects are education training exercises. Effectively, what we intend to achieve is to enhance resilience, a very strong word in times of pandemic, as we just witnessing and experiencing right now, and trigger the cyber response of the nations, the organizations, even the individuals. So research, development, and innovation will target capability building, bringing together academia and industry. Industry development will be fostered by these 2 previous pillars, and it's the most adequate way to transfer knowledge and bring the empowering of knowledge through the development of ideas to the incubation of projects. And this is our goal. It's to build this synergetic effect between the 3 lines. This picture just brings us our concept about education on cyber. So we need to get to a point where we have a cyber savvy workforce. And to that, we have to bring all the staff, all the elements, all the individuals to a process of developing competencies. So the professional development on the cyber so-called career will be just built upon the delivery of courses, but being cyber such a knowledge intensive capability, we need to move a little bit further. We need to think about also academic courses like masters, PhDs, and bring this to another level, I would say. And then we need to validate the competencies that were achieved by a operational test bed, being that cyber lab, cyber range, and then check, okay, these competencies were achieved and they are validated. So here comes what the previous speaker, Admiral Gamero Marx mentioned before. We need to certificate, to validate that the competencies were really achieved, and these persons, these staff members for the new organizations are fit for purpose and can do their very best to make the system more resilient. What we have just seen is the appearance of specific drawings. This means that we have already in the previous project that Portugal led, that is the multinational cyber defense education and training, developed pilot initiatives. And we tried to fulfill these different pieces of the puzzle. I would call it a virtual cycle. If we keep this pace and we compensate those that are leaving the organizations, being, of course, attractive to different salaries for different countries, whatever. I'm not speaking about something that is not real. We can keep the reinforcement and the resilience of the ecosystem. But it's good to see it like this. The way we are doing this is a structured way. So we also took on board our idea about the modular approach to the curriculum. And what you can see here, it's that the curriculum is built upon the depth of knowledge. So in the top education level that ends from starts in basic and ends in academic programs, but also targets all the staff members that you can imagine that are building the organizations and being responsible for cybersecurity and cyber defense related tasks. So here you can target an audience that are all users, like cyber hygiene, cyber security awareness courses, but you need also to take care of the decision makers that are located at the strategic, operational, tactical level, and also for the high specialized staff that are mainly those that work at SOCs, security operational centers, or even the cyber warriors, the so-called military that in the very last resource of a nation, safeguard the national sovereignty and of course the resilience of the state. In Portugal, we have already established bridges with the National Cybersecurity Center, and that contribution is being already formalized in a memorandum of understanding, where the project intends to support what Admiral Gamero Marques mentioned, the certification process that will bring the digital competencies framework reference model into fruition. So this is our initial approach. And of course, having this approach, we can see learning paths instead of courses. Because if you move from one job to another, you can just achieve or attend one specific module, and then you just fulfill all the entire competence set that you will be needing for the next job. And this construct is helping us to build that new path. So we have also developed pilot initiatives on all over these topics. So what I will do now is just to present you some examples of the three lines of development of the project. So research, development, and innovation. What we are aiming to do is to bring the innovation ecosystem also into place. So we will link academia, industry, of course, the private sector and enterprises to the security defense community and also the public sector. But of course, we will need also to make the bridge with the financing and I would say the boost for this ecosystem that is funding. And EDF, European Defense Fund, and also EDIP would help us to achieve that goal, because this is a PESCO project. Innovation areas, I just moved too fast here. Innovation areas that we have already pre-identified are those that are depicted: digital nomads and virtual leadership, artificial intelligence and machine learning, 5G, space and cybersecurity, and also information warfare and hybrid conflicts. These are teams, I would say, innovation areas that will help us to make the bridges that are necessary from ideation to incubation of projects. So moving to the industrial development and how we envisage that could be supported. The project also takes into consideration the national ecosystem and the EU ecosystem, and how we can move and cooperate between nations and provide new projects. So traditionally, what nations do is to be developed projects, pilot initiatives. And those pilot initiatives should bring to the reinforcement of national capabilities. Again, this is about capability building. Those projects, after being validated, can be pushed to the EU level by the different working groups and promote, in this scope, EU initiatives, EU pilots. Those EU pilots, after being validated, they could transform themselves and produce capability building related projects. And then is the materialization of the entire scope of PESCO. And so this is how we will move from national level to EU level to the fulfillment of PESCO objectives. This is another example of industry development, is the deployable and scalable security operational center. Is a project that is getting some attention and traction between the different participants. But to do this, we need consortiums. We need to have a cross-border approach and bring industry from one country and the other country, and together the added value of cooperation will bring us faster and more straight to the point of the delivery, time of the delivery of this kind of capabilities. So this is more or less how we operationalize the three different lines of effort and development of the project. Each one, education, training, exercises, research, development, innovation, and industry development, will have its own planning, its own line of development. But having the opportunity to integrate in a synergetic effect all these three vectors, we can support these three vectors between themselves. It means that if you incubate an idea, you can bring a course in a disruptive area of technology that needs, from a practical point of view, to be better understood by the society and be more actionable in the sense that will drive cybersecurity and cyber defense efforts. So we generate automatically a course for that. We have done that already for the digital nomads and virtual leadership. There is already one course and we have just started. So the ambition is quite high, but the pace also requires a swift action on this. These are the three projects that are already in place for cyber on the PESCO side. We have the Cyber Threats and Incident Response Information Sharing Platform, led by Greece, the cyber rapid response teams and mutual assistance in cybersecurity, led by Lithuania, and also the EU Cyber and Information Domain Coordination Center. This center is scheduled and foreseen to be transferred from Germany, that is the lead nation right now, to Brussels in 2023. Today, I participated in the morning in a meeting of the project team cyber defense of EDA, and we discussed this approach because we will need to synergize between all the different PESCO projects in this scope. So the participating nations, I've already mentioned, observers and interested member states. This is how the cooperation will be enhanced. So we will have a national ecosystem that will be articulated, as I just mentioned and explained. And then from a EU level, we will integrate the different networks that will be established. This is more or less, and I'm not sure that you are familiar with the digital innovation hubs in the different areas that the European Union is right now under this resilience and recovery plan defining as a support to this transformation that needs to be done in order for us to achieve the digital decade goals. So what is going on is that at each nation, there will be digital innovation hubs at the different areas of the economy. And then there will be a network between all of these digital innovation hubs from a national point of view, and then from cross-border, bringing a synergetic effect of a network of networks. So this is how the EU is fostering these developments. And just to conclude my presentation, I would just like to leave you with a couple of ideas. So it's all about empowering knowledge, developing ideas, and incubating projects. The project is original in scope and in its design. It has a large potential to produce change and in the right way, I would say, and make the difference. So we will reinforce interoperability and overcome capability building gaps. This is clear on the scope and the goals that the project intends to achieve. It aims to deliver key cyber capabilities, reduce the development cycle, and make us more on the way to keep the tempo of cyber. That is quite difficult. We will integrate the cyber defense training exercises platform that EDA developed under the project, and we will host it in the infrastructures that are being right now built at the center of Lisbon at the Military Academy campus. And then we will, in that facility, host a coordination platform that will integrate the training offer for all the countries in Europe. The European Union Cyber Academy Innovation Hub will also enhance cyber defense and cyber security efforts all over Europe, reinforcing and fostering cyber resilience, and of course, EU-NATO cooperation. I anticipate that my colleague will for sure speak about this, and I will just close my presentation here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass over to Coronel.
Okay, first of all, let me just present my appreciation for the invitation to the NCI Academy to be here. Dr. Figueiredo Lopes, thank you so much on behalf of Dr. Gary Hargraves, the director, that unfortunately was not able to be here. So it's a pleasure to be and to try to share some of what the NCI Academy is and what is its efforts towards the NATO Communications and Information System ecosystem. And I would also would like to apologize for my NATO English. So it's not English, it's not American English, it's NATO English. So sorry if I just speed up too much, or if I just use too much acronyms, just wave me and I will try to go back to the native.
Everything works. Thank you.
It worked. Let me just check. Okay. So the moving from Latina to Lisbon was not just a political decision. It was also a way to streamline and to join together the 4 sites that the NATO had to deliver training, CIS related. So in order to have a better coordination, to have a better control, and to answer to the NATO requirements regarding the CIS environment and ecosystem, those 4 sites in Glons, mainly for RC2, Air Command and Control, The Hague for supporting collective training, Mons for commercial IT, information technologies, and Latina for computers communications, command and control, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, C4ISR. I will use the acronyms from now on, and cyber that moved from Latina to Lisbon. So the Academy is more than one site here in Oeiras. We can just call Oeiras as the flagship for the Academy, where we deliver most of our training, but we are more than Oeiras. We are 2 other sites that are currently delivering training in Mons, Shape Oriented, and in The Hague in support of collective training. So, and we were lucky because we started with a 60-year experience on NATO CIS education and training. And we know that the effort that the NATO Communications and Information Agency spends on providing the best assets, the best systems to support NATO command and control, planning and execution of NATO operations will not be worth it if there will not be the people trained and educated in order to better take the use of these systems. So the NCI Academy is a roughly 140 workforce strong, committed every day with their knowledge and with their skills and their experience to provide cost-effective, high-quality, formal, individual, and collective training to NATO command structure, to NATO force structure, to the nations, allies, and partners, or to other organizations in order to better use the NATO communications and information systems that are made use for the operational areas in NATO. And they all share the vision of an academy developed to deliver world-class C4ISR and cyber training, and taking these 3 major pillars, let's say so. So organization that is mission focused, having the right training delivered to the right staff when and where is needed, and with a knowledge-centric, meaning that the staff is well prepared, its expertise and its knowledge is suitable to deliver this training, and creating a state-of-the-art knowledge hub. And it has a successful business model. So it's self-sustainable and considered to be the main C4ISR and cyber education and training facility in NATO, providing high-quality courses. So we may consider that the NATO education training exercises and evaluation policy, it's our main driver. So it's our guidelines, and this policy, it's built on the strategic objectives on the NATO 2010, the strategic concept. So to provide the ability to prevent, detect, deter, and defend against any threat that is, or aggression that is facing, that it's faced towards NATO. And in order to achieve all these objectives, the training and education events are delivered, thinking to the NATO command structure and NATO force structure, having in mind the NATO requirements and the NATO standards. So it's NATO oriented. All the education and training, it's NATO requirements and NATO standards oriented. So this means that nations are responsible to provide the basic training in order to fill their national requirements, as well as to prepare all the military and all the staff that is allocated in the forces that are allocated to NATO commands or NATO forces. By being responsible for this training and this education and this achievement of requirements does not mean that NATO does not have its own responsibility to provide support to nations in areas that the nation are not able to do it, because it's a NATO-specific equipment, it's a NATO-specific system that is not available at the nations, so nations do not know how to deliver this training. Or is it a combined joint operation and the nations are not able to deliver training and exercises into a combined joint environment? So NATO has its role responsibility to provide extra and to provide support training to the nations in order to achieve the NATO requirements. And this is where the NATO Communications and Information Academy places itself in order to be able and to provide support to the nations in order to the staff that is assigned to NATO positions to be trained and certified in the use of NATO-specific education and communications and information and cyber systems. So, and we do have that perception that it is our role to provide this knowledge, these skills to the staff on the NATO specific issues. But we also know that it's not possible for us to do it ourselves. So we see ourselves being part of the broader education and training ecosystem, where sharing is paramount to go and to have the latest knowledge, to be able to deliver and to develop the training to incorporate the latest developments, the latest training and learning methodologies. So we cannot do it ourselves because the speed that things change, it's so high that if we just focus on following the evolution, we will not be able to develop. So we need to be part of this ecosystem. We need to share, we need to cooperate and collaborate with all the other relevant stakeholders. And this is something that if we need a reminder, it was made last month by the NATO Secretary General and the Portuguese Prime Minister when they just have this inauguration ceremony of the academy, that they say, okay, NCI Academy should be the provider for state-of-the-art training in NATO systems, communications information systems, C4ISR, and cyber as well. So it's our challenge to be as adaptive and to stay at the leading edge of the training and education solutions. Once again, we cannot do it by ourselves alone. So here in Oeiras, we have mainly the training operations area of the NCI Academy. We are responsible to deliver hundreds of courses that can just provide skills that go from the deployment of communications assets hubs to the managing the systems, to operating the systems, or to maintaining those systems. So it has a broad range of knowledge and skills, and we do that through our more than 220 courses in our catalog that are available to NATO and to the nations and to the allies, and cover those areas that are on the slide. So deployable communications and information systems, wired and wireless communications assets, command and control on specific domains, logistic and operational planning tools, core services and commercial IT services, cyber defense and cyber security as well. And we are talking about cyber defense and cyber security, and the Academy aims to be part of the central training hub for cyber defense and cyber security in NATO, along with other relevant stakeholders, saying that other stakeholders like NATO School Obermagau or the Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn, Allied Command Transformation, the Cyber Defense Operation Center in Mons, or other relevant organizations in order to raise and to create the right curriculum to develop the skills and the competencies that are required to our soldiers and to our staff that is dealing with the cyber defense and cybersecurity area. But we are lucky because we do not start from the scratch, from zero in this domain. So it was not coordinated, but it follows the previous presentation. So we are building our curriculum based on the findings from one of the NATO smart defense projects, the multinational cyber defense education and training project that was led by Portugal. And fortunately for us, Portugal also was part of the EU cyber defense discipline, and all these two findings. So the mapping of the courses that were available, the mapping of the competencies, so knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required to perform specific roles, and the mapping and organizing those competencies into different categories and training audiences, as well as taking the National Initiative for Cyber Education, NIS framework, that have a common language for these skills and competencies and knowledge that are necessary. So this multinational cyber defense education and training project just raised a number of or some training paths for the different performance levels and categories, and came up with this unified cyber competencies framework that is the base for our work that we are developing ahead. So for each category and for each target audience and competency that performance proficiency that is required, we would just finding the courses that were available in NATO. And now the way ahead is just to try to synchronize, to eliminate overlaps, and to try to stream the training, the cyber training, by developing the right curriculum and assigning it to the right training and education facility. So it is easy to understand that the basic knowledge could be assigned by NCI Academy, by NATO Defense College, or by NATO School of Bromagau, depending on the categories and the training audiences. But as we are moved to expert level training, and as you all know, the cyber workforce, it's not very abundant, and it's very, I would say, the appetite for having the right people in our organization does not allow us to spare so much to others because it's quite scarce. So we do foresee that for very specific training for expert level of performance, we would be outsourced, following our standards, following our quality assurance, following all our procedures. So I think I just did it on time.
Yes, I think so.
Probably a little bit longer, but thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be ready for your questions.
So we are over the time 4 minutes later. So I will ask my president if you allow to have a few more minutes to 5 minutes, okay, to take some questions from the audience. Thank you very much. And we have one. I don't know if you have the micro, or you can just speak loud if you want. 5 minutes for questions. Please be brief. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. My name is Michael Sinkenel. I'm from Austria. I'm working also very much on cybersecurity, hybrid threats, disinformation. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation, for your very clear statements. My question is regarding cybersecurity and disinformation, especially in your training activities. do you see that there is more or less an intersection between those two areas of hybrid threats? Because in hybrid threats, often we have seen that the threat actors use both cybersecurity, cyber attacks, and disinformation campaigns together. So I'm interested in how you cooperate and try to engage those two aspects together in your trainings. Thank you.
You want to take this one?
Yeah, you're right. But disinformation, if we rightly recall, has always been there. Even the Roman Empire and the Alexander the Great did disinformation. What is the difference? Is the digital, is the cyberspace that not only puts speed, but also scope. And that's where the disciplines related with cybersecurity come into play. But in our cybersecurity center, our courses, we have just published yesterday, as a matter of fact, a MOOC, an online course, our fifth, dedicated to the healthy usage of social media. And that one is complementary to another one that we have published in the beginning of this year, dedicated to disinformation. And we have done it in a companionship with the National News Agency, because we don't know anything about newspapers and those communication media, but we joined efforts. We shared information with them to come up with such a set of courses. Yes, but we do it online. Okay.
Thank you. We have space for another question, please. Or if no question, we can, okay. Question, please.
I was told that you spoke mainly of defense. But I was told that if you cannot punish the attacker, when you think about this sentence,
You want to direct the question, or it's for anyone that can take it?
no, it's the question. When you think about that, and you think that you just can defend yourself, or you think that you have to punish?
I will take this. Paul will take this one.
Okay, is there anything else?
No,
Okay. I would just like to thank both questions. First, I would just dare to add that besides the way we have seen information, we should remotely get back to Sun Tzu, that is defeat without fighting. And hybrid threats and hybrid conflicts are all about that. So I do think that cyber is not enough to understand the drivers. We have to expand it to the information domain. And there are several countries doing that already. Just by naming one, Germany is doing that. The cyber command is not cyber command, it's cyber and information domain command. And that is the name of the PESCO project that will be in Brussels in 3 years from now. So I would say that is the driver. Considering the other question that was raised, of course, cyber, it's, I would say, agnostic in nature. But the use we make of it can be very dramatic and bring all the good and all the bad as the human nature. And by the fact, we should highlight the point that it's the first domain that is built by man and is imperfect in nature. So that is something that we cannot forget. So it's an instrument of human behavior and human decision. Considering the way we can stabilize it, we have to have rules of good behavior. We need to certify all the set of activities that need to be done and fulfilled mainly on the security and defense sector to achieve at least the trust condition that we can use and exploit freely and openly cyberspace and bring all the value it can bring to humankind and societies, nourishing development and activities. But then we need to be prepared to be resilient. And resilience right now, it's mixing with defense at a certain level. Because if you are not able to defend, you are not resilient. But we should highlight also the role of the different actors in the society. So the military are still the owners of coercion, legitimate coercion in the society. So they need to be, I used to say this, they are the most skillful workforce that we need to develop, because they are the ones that need to act when everything failed. And that is, of course, the same background and strategic reasoning that brings that cannot be development without security. So if we want to build a better and secure cyberspace, we cannot depreciate or diminish the role of defense.
Okay, no more space, but 30 seconds if you want to add something. Coronel, no, that's okay. So we are just finished because the time is over. So another question. Can I take this one, President? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I will try to be brief because I understood they are very strict on time. Mainly the example I've provided during my presentation related with the digital innovation apps. You need to build your own ecosystem, be resilient as a nation, a member state, and that is something that needs to happen one way or another. Without PESCO projects, it's more or less mandatory for any nation. And then you need to bring that to a cross-border approach, then think about the EU as an economic and sovereign space, let's call it like that, at least in cyberspace. And for that, you need to achieve, I would say, a certain level of interoperability and cooperation. Without that, we'll never achieve this. And I do believe that this project will help us to foster that path, because the idea is to bring to the project the member states, but together with the member states, a representative from academia and from industry. So our meetings will be at multi-level, I would say. So we'll have plenary sections or sessions where we will have the national representatives, but we can meet on academia perspective or at an industrial perspective, and then bring to the plenary sections or both views and synergize in order to produce new solutions. There will be a European command sooner or later. I've just mentioned that the European Cyber and Information Domain Center that is led, and a project that is led by Germany, will move to Brussels in 3 years' time.
Final remark from Admiral.
Yes, I tend to disagree. I tend to disagree with the command. A center maybe, but I tend to be on the part of those that don't see European Union with a central command for operations, be it air, maritime, land, or cyber, and that has been thoroughly discussed both at the Parliament and the Council. But coming just 1 minute to the core of your question, when you take a look again to my presentation, in the first slide that goes deeper on the cybersecurity strategy, the last item is the development of common cybersecurity skills in European Union. And yesterday in our conference, one member of the EU Parliament has just mentioned that there's a goal in the majority of the European parliamentary of the European Union that wants to produce a set of courses with a common framework for European Union member states to have as a framework in order to foster interoperability, both at the English level and other languages, and to foster also the exchange of people within the European Union. So from the political point of view, there is that trend. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting indeed. Yes, but we have to close, unfortunately, because it was a very interesting question. But I believe that you may go on in the after the meeting. So thank you all. Please give a final applause to our panel members, and thank you for being here.
I don't want to put a question, but I want to congratulate our Portuguese colleagues for the excellent presentations. And this inspired me to invite you to publish in our publication we have in English on cyber, and in the new publication related with the Center of Excellence, Euro-Atlantic Center of Excellence on Resilience, which was established last month in Bucharest. So I will be in contact with our colleagues from organizers to establish closer links. Portugal and Romania as both corner extremes of European Union, but EURODEFENCE have helped to be closer. Thank you very much, and again, congratulations.
Thank you for comments. Thank you. Bye.
We have 5 minutes to start the other panel.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I know it's a time of coffee, but I ask you a little bit patience. Good afternoon and welcome to this panel, especially to the distinguished EuroDefense members. A greeting for all of us on this digital event. My name is Caetano de Souza. I'm very pleased to moderate this interesting debate. I hope it will be a fruitful and enjoyable as well. On behalf of Dr. António Figueiredo Lopes, ED Portugal President and acting president of the EuroDefense Network, I will start the second panel on sustainable energy in EU defense and security sector. This panel will be composed by Mr. Jean-François Ripoche and Mr. José Caleia Rodrigues and Ms. Ana Filipa Ferreira Godinho. Thank you all. Let me start this topic by saying that the last 2 decades witnessed an amazing technical and scientific development in the area of alternative energy, creating the current energy transition. As you know, the EU aims to achieve global leadership in the field of the new environment policies with deep decarbonization, climate neutrality, with the widespread use of renewable energies, setting very precise goals and objectives for its member states. As you know, the EU could become a standard setter for energy transition. With this energy transition in progress, we have the notion of its future and implications in the military capacities, operational and logistic as part of the priorities set out by the member states in order to guarantee its security and defense. It is therefore with the notion of this complementarity that we might consider the main inside the EU all-inclusive approach to addressing the triangle: energy, environment, security and defense. As Mr. Daniel Fiot said recently, greening of defense can unlock technological innovation and enhance operational autonomy, as well to contribute to European Green Deal. This is certainly, I hope, what we will be pleased to hear in this conference room, with the attention through our distinguished speakers, including the role of importance of green cooperation for the defense of the EU, climate change, and the EU defense roadmap, strategic approach, and we will certainly hear the implications and major constraints in the field of energy geopolitics, namely the energy dependence of the EU on external sources, of course, a serious security threat. Finally, we will have a national view of the latest developments on this field. Now, let's move to the first presentation. Mr. Jean-François Ripoche is Director of Research, Technology and Innovation at European Defence Agency. He was appointed on June 2014 as Research and Technology Director of Strategic Directorate of DGA, the French MOD Procurement Agency. He began his career at DGA in 1988 at Tactical Missile Program Service as engineer in charge of R&T for missile electronic equipments. In 2005, he was appointed head of R&T Office of the Weapon Systems Directorate. And briefly, I said that Jean-François Ripoche joined Strategy Directorate in 2008, where he first held the position of Deputy Director for Industrial Affairs in charge of electronics and land systems and naval systems industry. And in 2012, he became head of capability development of C4I Star, where he participated in the launch of the CER-CGIN satellite, GOD4D, and Descartes Infrastructure Communication Network Program, as well in establishment of the Cybersecurity Capabilities Master Plan. Je voudrais d'abord remercier Jean-François Ripoche d'avoir bien voulu accepter l'invitation de l'Eurodéfense. Merci beaucoup de vous joindre à nous. Nous serons tous attentifs. Jean-François, la parole est à vous, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, merci. My Portuguese is unfortunately not as good as your French. Thank you for your invitation, and it's my pleasure to present you today what EDA does in the field of energy and environment. I have a presentation. I will try to stay in the 15 minutes limit, so hopefully it works, and I will now share my screen. You can see the slides now?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. What I will touch upon is, of course, who we are, just as a reminder, and then how we are organized to tackle with the energy matters, and say a few words about our contribution to the climate change and defense roadmap. Well, EDA's main mission is to support the Council and the Member States in their effort to improve the Union's defense capabilities. The Council decision precise that it's in the field of crisis management and to sustain the CSDP, but as you will see, well, we try to embrace this at on the whole and global field of defense. So we are an intergovernmental agency of the Council, except for Denmark, who has an opt-out on CSDP. We were established in 2004, based in Brussels, and we're a small shop, less than 200 persons. Our main mission is to be the main intergovernmental prioritization instrument in defense capability development at EU level. Also be the preferred cooperation forum for technology and capability development, and we have a living portfolio of about 50 R&D projects, for example, worth close to 300 million euros. And we also act as a military interface between member states and EU-wide policy, and that's where energy can be a good example. We try to be the voice of the military when energy is matters, and but also make sure that ministries of defense are aware of what's happening on the civilian side and how they can benefit from those initiatives. We also have a similar activity for a single European sky, for example. going more into directly into the topic of today, we rely on two groups of bodies to perform this task in the energy domain. We have what we call an energy and environment working group, who is more focusing on technology matters. I will explain a bit more. And the European Commission, the DG Energy, has funded a consultation forum for sustainable energy in the defense and security sector, using Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe funds. So this energy and environment working group, it was formed in 2014. It took stock on what was called at the time the EDA military green initiatives. And the goal is really to support the MODs in having a common approach to energy management and environmental aspects to achieve the savings through energy efficiency and alternative energy sources. Of course, when you're talking about the military, mission comes first. So it's not a trade-off between operations and energy. It's a resilient and robust way of managing your energy in support of the mission. And then, of course, contribute to implement the climate change and defense roadmap. One important area, well, the key areas, there's training. People in the MODs were not always aware of what could be done and how, for example, you could procure energy or procure energy management systems. You need to know how much energy you spent or used in order to make savings. So there's an important strand of work on data collection and analysis. And then you need to have solutions, so where technology comes into play. As an example, I'll start with the right side of the chart. We have collected national related and energy data to support the MOD's decision making. And well, I will mention one of the key findings, for example, is that when you aggregate the answers of the 22 MODs who answered the first survey, you find out that, and it's no surprise, the armed forces in Europe are using the energy equivalent of a smaller states, for example, the size of the Baltic states. So it's not nothing, and if you do savings here, it will show. And more on the technology or technical side, we supported the realization of a demonstrator who was fielded in UTM Mali. So we could see how management systems, smart management system, were working in real conditions, including the security environment, which was not easy. And but it provided savings and good experience for the command there, and eventually was refurbished and transferred to stay there in the end. So the mix of solar panel, energy management system, also the right, for example, right temperature for the cooling systems can provide you great savings. You don't need to cool your room at 20 degrees. If you do it only at 25, then you make a lot of savings. That's the kind of lessons we learned there. We try to expand the activity of the group. We conducted a foresight exercise to get a good consensus on what could be the prioritization, the prioritized RMT needs, and also to have studies more focused on the platforms, not only the infrastructure. That said, and using the limited own budget of the agency, we perform a few studies. One is of course to explore what artificial intelligence could bring to the energy management systems with case study, and it's a study which is coming to an end, and we hope to get roadmaps that our member states can implement soon. We are launching, and the tender is just now issued, a study on how to manage the waste to energy technologies and cycle in operation. So it's more about circular economy, but also savings, and also one of the objectives is, of course, to have to reduce the logistics burdens on the armed forces. It can be a problem in energy, but also a security issue in some areas. So that's for the energy and environment working group. And another important initiative, as I mentioned, is what we call the consultation forum for energy, in short. So it's, as I said, funded by the European Commission. The idea is really to bring together energy community and defense community so that the ministries of defense move towards green, resilient, and more efficient energy consumers. So there's a line of work on policy, there's a line of work on renewable energy sources, but also, as I mentioned, protection of critical energy infrastructure. One of the goals is to make the armed forces more resilient. And there's also trying to find solutions. So there's a technology and research and innovation hub. And also, of course, it's also bringing some funds to the MOD so that they can invest in their green initiatives. Which may prove difficult if it's only a question of using the national MOD budget. We try to be as concrete as possible. So the idea is really to develop project ideas, to make the MODs aware of the EU energy legislation and how they can take benefit of it, and to fund on this small budget here again, small feasibility studies, and then to get access to other funds like structural funds or blending instruments. That's how the consultation firm contributes. And well, to give an example here on the slide, we also try to be part of the EU's offshore strategy to see how renewables using areas controlled by the ministries of defense or could host some windmills, for example, and benefit to the MOD's resilience. That's the kind of thing we try to do. There was also a study on how you could have a hub, an hydrogen hub for the military vehicles around Europe, so that you would move also towards a model where your vehicles more in the civilian side of it, of the ministers, could run on hydrogen electric vehicles based on hydrogen fuel cells rather than having fossil fuel all around Europe. That's the kind of things, or nearly zero emission buildings and so on. And then we I think it was in 2020, for the first time, we could get some EU funding for Slovenia to move towards those kind of initiatives. So we believe it's been a really fruitful initiative, and we have a very good cooperation with the Commission, the European Commission here. Then I will go towards the conclusion in mentioning that, of course, at political level also, the Council has really realized that climate change and energy matters are really important for defense. And end of last year, the climate change and defense roadmap was approved with an important role for EDA to go on with those actions and to make sure those actions turn into concrete projects and solutions. So there's still this operational dimension to share good practices, to address vulnerabilities, to improve data collection. As I said, you have to know what you use to make savings, and also to propose models. The consultation forum will also contribute. For example, there is a green public procurement option for fixed infrastructure. We will develop the impact of defense activities on offshore renewable energy sources, and yeah, protection against hybrid threats, hazards, climate change is also important. And we'll try to have a repository of solutions and research projects. So, as a conclusion, I think defense can and must play its part in delivering something of this global strategic efforts. Military needs are still there, and they need to be balanced with this change of environment. But missions come first. Once again, it's really important. EDA has been assisting MOD since 2014 here. Well, we hope we can continue on this line of work. The Energy and Environment Working Group that I mentioned was supposed to be maybe a temporary body. Will definitely become permanent because this energy matters will not disappear. We are really convinced, and I think our MODs are also convinced, that being sustainable on the energy side will strengthen the resilience and also ensure strategic autonomy for the European defense. Still many barriers to our challenges to address. Access to funds, of course, is not the least of it. Sometimes there are legislative barriers. So it's very important that all national efforts are combined with also multinational collaboration, and we also want to get academia and industry input and expertise to bring in the solutions. You can learn more about us by visiting our website. You will get fact sheets, videos, and all this, because I've just, of course, been skipping a bit faster on all that we do in such a wide area, but that's, I hope, has given you a fair overview of what we do, and I'll be happy, of course, to answer some questions at the end after the other distinguished speakers I've presented. So thank you for your attention, and the floor is back to you.
Merci beaucoup, Jean-François, pour votre magnifique et informative intervention que vous venez de nous présenter. Merci. The second presentation, we are going now for the second presentation. José Calleia Rodrigues is PhD in Social Sciences, Strategic Studies branch, BA in International Relations with honors and Master in International Political Economics with University, President of a company in Venezuela, 1978 to 81, Director of companies in Portugal and Angola, Economic and Commercial Counselor at the Portuguese embassies in Morocco, South Africa, Namibia, and Israel, 88 to 2002, author of several books and publications of geopolitics of energy, such as The Power of Oil, 2004, and co-author in 2018, in Context of Security and Analysis and Perspectives. And of course, he wrote several articles and analyses on geopolitical issues, namely on Semanário Económico, Diário Económico, and he is commander of the Order of Merit. Professor José, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank EURODEFENCE Portugal for providing me this opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Figueiredo Lopes. I'd like to take this occasion to point out in this short time available to us how much the European Union's energy dependence on external sources of supply is and the greatness in terms of global security, and reflecting on the environmental and geopolitical consequences about different options available or to be taken by the European Union in order to reduce their energy dependence. Let us begin by emphasizing that the European Union has the greatest economic and investment relationship on a global scale that must be preserved and defended from any kind of disruptive actions by opposing powers. However, Europe's dependence on external sources of energy resources poses a serious risk to its security. Okay. Let us begin by analyzing the extent of dependence on energy resources obtained outside the European Union. Nothing less than almost 60%. Despite some improvements achieved in recent years by some member states, almost all remain in deficit. In fact, the difference between the global energy produced and the energy consumed is enormous, in the order of well over 50%. But where are the major deficits? Naturally, in the so-called fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, or coal. Renewable resources for electricity generation already account for more than half of the resources that guarantee this generation. But the great energy consumption falls on the so-called fossil fuels, particularly with regard to oil and natural gas, which are still almost absent from production in EU countries. Oil accounts for 4% of the total energy produced in the EU, while its consumption reaches 36% of the total. The situation in natural gas, although not so serious, is also very important. Production corresponds to 9% of the total energy produced, while its consumption reaches 21% of the total. Está a andar sozinho. Está a andar sozinho. That is where we must continue to act more and more. However, from where energy resources are obtained to bridge deficits. In the year 2018, according to statistical data published by Eurostat, around 30% of European Union oil imports, 40% of natural gas imports, and 42% of coal imports came from Russia. In the same year, Gazprom, Russia's state-owned gas monopoly, supplied more than 200 billion cubic meters of gas to European countries, with 81% heading to Western Europe. Russia has imposed itself as major fuel supplier to the European Union. European Union excessive energy dependence on external sources poses a major threat to its security and economic sector. It should be noted that the risk of discontinuity of gas supplies to the European Union is very high. Those pipelines run through regions with major geopolitical issues which may be difficult to solve. It should be recalled that a large part of Europe, including the Balkans, has been dependent on Russian natural gas since Soviet times. Little has changed in this respect with the implosion of the Soviet Union, as Russia was no longer seen as a strategic adversary. In addition, Russia's dependence on gas sales in Europe as an important source of revenue for state-owned Gazprom was considered a guarantee against the use of gas supply as a strategic tool by Moscow. However, Russia's energy supply dependency resulting from a pipeline system built during the Cold War has increasingly proved to be a negative and disruptive factor in Europe's energy security. Although the system has recently been expanded with the installation of Nord Stream gas pipelines, which connect the Viborg and Ust-Luga oil fields in Russia to the Greifswald terminal in Germany across the Baltic Sea, the dependence on supplies continue to show a very high risk. Note the strong opposition of the United States to the entry into service of Nord Stream 2. Supply disruptions of energy resources would cause very significant losses for European national economies. In order to counter such a possibility, the European Union should make it a priority to diversify its supply routes and develop alternative sources of energy. There have been discoveries in the Eastern Mediterranean, although the infrastructure is yet to be constructed. However, member states of the European Union have multiple possibilities of obtaining energy resources ranging from shale oil and shale gas to methane hydrates to even green hydrogen. That is, hydrogen produced by desalinized water electrolysis without fossil fuels. As fuel resources through wind power and photovoltaic energy as renewable electricity generators. Methane hydrates are a potentially vast fossil fuel energy source that could provide up to 10 to 15% of global natural gas production within the next 2 decades. At the same time, hydrates extraction for energy use and potential hydrate destabilization due to global warming could lead to the release of large emissions, further providing an acceleration of climate change. Inventory of these resources available in the European Union guarantees oil for many years and natural gas for many decades. The main problems of the European Union with regard to the development of its own resources in general and of shale gas or the methane hydrates in particular, Europe has a high population density, resulting in great sensitivity and environmental constraints. Another major concern will be the potential influence of the development of shale gas on the safety and quality of groundwater. It is feared that development of shale gas will result in fresh water shortages in the areas of its development and cause contamination and environmental pollution in fresh water and soil. As an alternative external source, the European Union members could also access the shale gas that the United States is currently able to export to Europe. Very recently, on the 27th of May, as the continent was beginning to ease out of lockdown, the European Union proposed an economic recovery plan that pledges to continue its Green Deal, a strategy to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions in Europe. The plan includes a commitment to eventually produce 1 million metric tons of green hydrogen per year, backed by funding of up to 30 billion euros. On the same day, in the UK, which is no longer part of the European Union, members of parliament published a blueprint for a green recovery from COVID-19 that advises the government to boost investment in hydrogen infrastructure. Today, hydrogen is mainly used in oil refining and the manufacturing of ammonia and methanol, two key basic chemicals. Its bakers see the gas being used in the future to produce electricity or being fed into fuel cells to run cars or power plants. The chances of diversifying energy sources are vast, and increased supply guarantees are also possible. Even to reach the minimum energy security requirements through the development of space-based solar power that guarantee the uninterrupted supply of electricity, far more difficult to neutralize and which ensures defense operations in the event of obvious and imminent threat of emergency resulting from natural or unavoidable disaster. At the source of electricity generation, the solar radiation is collected and converted to microwave energy by means maintained in outer space on a satellite system. The microwave energy is then transmitted to Earth and converted to electric power for distribution. If successful, such systems could provide constant access to almost unlimited power and thus play a significant role in national and international energy security strategies. With growing international awareness of energy security challenges, the promise of space-based solar power for clean and unlimited energy for all humankind is certainly appealing. Preventing resource conflicts in the face of increasing global population and demands in the 21st century is a high priority for security and defense. All solution options to these challenges should be explored, including opportunities from space. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, José, for your interesting presentation. Now it's time to listen Ana Filipa Godinho. Engineer Ana Godinho has a degree in environmental engineering from the Polytechnic Institute of Tomorrow and Master, I think in environmental engineering also, from the Faculty of Sciences of University of Lisbon. She develops her activities, Directorate of Quality and Environmental Services of Directorate General for National Defense Resources. Ana Godinho is a national representative in the Environmental Protection Working Group of NATO. And Filipe, the floor is yours. Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon to all. I would like to start by thanking Portuguese EURODEFENCE the invitation to participate in this meeting. So we are gathered here today to discuss sustainable energy in the EU defense and security sector. I will start by highlighting some former steps taken to present the Portuguese approach, tell you what the Ministry of Defense has been doing in the past few years, what projects we are developing, and what we feel are our main challenges. But before diving into sustainable energy, the main focus of our panel, we have to understand what is behind it. So as it was previously referred, climate change is affecting us all. It is disrupting national economies and affecting lives as weather patterns change, sea levels rise, and weather events become more extreme. What have we been doing for the past decades? Well, 24 years ago, 1997, several nations signed the Kyoto Protocol, where industrialized countries and economies in transition committed to limit and reduce greenhouse gases emission. Still, 18 years later, we felt the need to sign a new agreement, Paris Agreement, in 2015, which consisted in a legally binding international treaty on climate change and aimed to strengthen the global response to this threat by containing a global temperature rise. This agreement also aimed to strengthen the ability of countries to deal with the impacts of climate change through appropriate financial flow, a new technology framework, and an enhanced capacity building framework. Later in 2019, we were introduced to the European Green Deal, which aims to make Europe climate neutral by 2050 by boosting the economy through green technology, by creating sustainable industry and transport, and by cutting pollution. We have also been introduced to the proposal of an European climate law, a law that aims to ensure that all EU policies contribute to this goal and that all sectors of economy and society play their part. So in this context, Portugal has been one of the leading countries in this fight against climate change. In 2019, Portugal presented a 2050 carbon neutral roadmap, a 2030 national plan for energy and climate, a national strategy for adapting to climate change, and the national action plan for adapting to climate change. This Portuguese approach is also in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and European policies and legislation. Still, this line of action has to be transposed to every sector and every governance area. Sorry. National defense, as part of the government, works towards the same goal, to adapt and combat climate change, not only because we are part of it, but because this presents a crucial challenge to our mission. So how can we, the MOD, do this, adapt and combat to climate change? First of all, the MOD, as a Directorate General for National Defense Resources, and it is its responsibility, the National Defense Environmental Policy, as well as the National Defense Environmental Award, the proposal, implementation, coordination of activities of an environmental nature, the intervention as a technical body in process related to armament, equipment, infrastructure, and other services, cooperation with the branches of the armed forces for the implementation and maintenance of environmental management systems, and promote awareness raising, training, and dissemination of information. Since it is its responsibility for the environmental policy, our first step was to review and get approved by the Ministry of Defense early 2020, a new environmental directive for national defense. This directive has three major guidelines: climate change and resource management, environmental management, education, awareness, and cooperation. We believe that these are the big themes that we can work on as a defense sector. To operationalize the new directive, an action plan was developed with several goals and measures to achieve them, starting from 2020 to 2023. So related with this first guideline, climate change and resource management, Portuguese defense has already some work done and some work in progress. When it comes to sustainable energy, we decided it was important to have a starting point, which would represent our moment zero, and so we are monitoring our consumption in order to have previous data This will allow us to realize our consumption tendency and our energy mix, and if our efforts to reduce it are being well placed or in the right measure. This is, in our opinion, a great basis to start from, because how can we decide how much we want to or can reduce if we do not know how much we consume or where our energy comes from? This is also something that the EDA has been working on with the member states for some time now. When it comes to the origin of our energy, we already have some renewable production from solar PV, as you can see here in airbase number 5, with 3,000 square meter, counting 550 PV panels and installed power of 200 kilowatts. Between 40 to 50% of the electricity consumed comes from emission-free energy sources during normal activity days. On days of minimum activity, it can be 90%. We also have this Army unit with 160 modules and an installed power of 45.6 kilowatt, but we do not have yet any data since it began producing late January 2021. We have another project in the making. This is the Naval Base of Lisbon. It will start implementation on the first semester of 2022 with an installed power of 1 megawatt. The point is that this 1 megawatt will provide pretty much all the needs for energy of the naval base, but the idea is to scale it up to 4 megawatts to maybe produce green hydrogen later on. So when it comes to energy efficiency measures, our bet also focused in replacing lighting systems, install motion and presence detectors, as well as smart meters so we can get a better knowledge of our grid, acquiring more efficient devices, rehabilitating buildings through better isolation and replacement of HVAC systems, and also through our human resources qualification. I just want to add that solar panels for water heating are widely implemented through our defense universe. So here on human resources qualification, we have several courses that have been promoted by the Directorate General as well as the EDA. This is an example of our naval training ship on NRP Sagres, and they have replaced their gala lighting system with LED, and they have replaced some older equipments with more efficient equipments. We have another main goal of our directive, and this is to cooperate with different structures, public and private entities, national and international, and embracing the scientific community, industrial sector, and investigation centers. We feel that this is fundamental for us to keep up to date with the environmental state of the art. So we are now participating in multiple projects, such as Project in Urine, related to local energy communities, with 17 partners from 8 European countries. We are implementing the resource efficiency program. This is an energy efficiency information system for all public administration. We have several projects of renewable energy already in the making. We have implemented and certified several environmental management systems, and this helps us because it helps raise awareness and it helps to monitor and try to reduce our consumptions. We have applied to several financial mechanisms, and this is a bittersweet one because this is something that we are doing and is also a challenge that I will explain later on. And we have been cooperating with other entities in areas like sustainable mobility, energy, water nexus, hydrogen, and circular economy. So in order to help this transition to a carbon neutral economy, we will be able to count on our recovery and resilience plan that was approved this week by the Commission and the President, Ursula von der Leyen. And we hope this will boost the transition, namely by bringing funding to buildings energy efficiency, sustainable mobility, and industry decarbonization, hydrogen, and renewables. So I'm almost finishing, but before that, I will have to address our main challenges. Our lack of qualified human resources, the funding and financial mechanisms for sustainability. They are a challenge because they are very bureaucratic. They consume a lot of time and human resources, and sometimes our projects are not approved. It is also hard to find financial mechanisms that consider the MOD eligible since we are a very specific sector and also part of the public administration. Since we have seen some of our applications approved, mainly regarding the rehabilitation of buildings, through rehabilitating facades and roofs, better isolation, replacing lighting and HVAC systems, and we were able to acquire some electrical cars through our environmental fund coordinated by the Portuguese Ministry of the Environment. Another main challenge is that we are rarely portrayed as potential partners by scientific community and others, mainly because they are unaware of how much work we do towards sustainability, and they cannot picture the Ministry of Defense as a player or a partner on these matters. This is something that we are trying to fight, trying to show more and more of our work. Last but not least, since it is maybe one of the biggest challenge for us, is the adaptation modernization of our military operations, such as fleets and weapon systems. We are still very dependent on investigation and development to provide us with some viable solutions and alternatives. I will leave you with our vision for the MOD in a second. A national defense committed to a sustainable tomorrow and prepared for future challenges. Thank you so much for your attention. This is it for me.
Thank you, Ana Filipa. Now, we are looking forward to hearing from you, from the audience, your questions. We have 8 minutes for the questions. And so let me, I give priority to our online participants if you have any question. If not, okay, just one quick, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a real pleasure to have such interesting presentations and giving the overview not only on the European level but also from Portugal. So we discovered a new reality, which was also mentioned in this new US strategy for post-hydrocarbon world, that electricity is the new oil. So we have to focus on electricity more and more and to see all these implications. What I want to mention is the fact that you hosted in Lisbon yesterday and today an important event of working group of EURODEFENCE, of European Defense Agency, Mr. Director Ripoche. It was working group 3 on protection and critical energy infrastructures. And we are very pleased that the Secretary General of European Defense Romania was moderator of this working group, and very interesting conclusions. A concern I have, and I think I want to know if at a European level or in Portugal, you have dedicated attention to the problem of solar storms, the disturbing impact of solar storms on the grid, on the whole system we have, not only in Europe, in the world. We have we are waiting in the next 2-3 years to have the big storm of solar, which can hamper the whole system we have. And if we have some not only theoretical but also practical exercise to show the resilience of the system. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your question, your interesting question. I don't know if I can start with Mr. Ripoche. It's in a good position to answer the first part of this question.
Okay, thank you. No, interesting point indeed. In general, there is the question of protection of critical infrastructure from natural hazard. So it may include solar storms. But I would say the groundwork with what we call space weather is more from on the space community and the civilian side. And I guess here, defense is usually a follower or relying on hardened equipment. But I agree, it's an important hazard possible, just like floods or things. But well, I think for historical reason, not directly considered as related to climate change. So
Okay.
that's the state
thank
of
you.
play. We could discuss, we could argue about the relevance.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Maybe I pass the floor to Mr. Faslan. The time is yours, please.
The green hydrogen on the one hand, and space-based solar power that we present.
I'm sorry, but I don't hear anything.
From now, I mean, when can we count on such energy forms?
A very, very long time. Very, very long. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Okay. Another question from. I hope you have a question.
So our main focus right now is to act on all the support part of our military operations. Because like I said, I think we are still very dependent on investigation and development to provide us some viable alternatives like alternative fuels instead of jets, and maybe some solar boats one day. And we have not really a plan to act on our operational missions yet, but we are trying to be more sustainable in everything that follows, everything that supports that area. I hope I answered your question. I'm sorry, I failed to mention this, but our Navy already has a project about hydrogen. So we are not that further out. We are just working our way in. Okay.
We have time, 1 minute plus one more question, a simple question, please. If we don't have any question, let me conclude by saying the risks and threats that loom on horizon will always be very present. All of us know that situation. The energy transition itself may contain uncertainty factors and implementation path in the near future. I don't know if it's so long or no. I'm not sure, but in a way, the area of security and defense is a strategic sector that entails a shared planning and programming model. And it is with this level of ambition, that we must be articulate. And I could say also the allocating projects to our industrial and technological fabric, supporting industry, creating synergies in use of new climate-friendly technologies, and at some time, working with academia, will be a factor of strong development and dynamism in the defense economy sector. I know it's not an easy task. And the current strategic thinking requires the use of parameters of holistic nature whatever the angle of approach, of course, and namely in terms of the operational and logistical effectiveness of forces within the scope of defense economics, or even in the integration or assimilation of adequate energy systems. It is therefore imperative to strengthen Europe's technological advantage and support its defense industrial base, thereby creating adding values in the international, in the internal use of the new energy sources and vectors. And personally, this seminary was for me very productive, taking account the objectives foreseen for the new EURODEFENCE energy working group, which I will present tomorrow. Je vous remercie de votre attention et I ask a round of applause for our brilliant speakers. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a nice continuation.
Jean-François, merci pour votre participation. J'espère que la prochaine, c'est à Lisbonne. Thank you very much.
We hope to meet in real, for real, in physical presence very soon. The sooner the better. So bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Augusto Melo Correia from EURODEFENCE Portugal. And according to the program for this afternoon, I will be delighted to moderate panel 3 on towards a new defense architecture for Europe. There will be 2 well-qualified speakers on the related subject. General Professor António Fontes Ramos, Vice Chairman of EURODEFENCE Portugal General Assembly, who will address the Strategic Compass Initiative as an operational tool to implement the EU global strategy. And Dr. Erik van Doorn, Vice President of EURODEFENCE Netherlands, who will be addressing the future of the integrated EU defense organization. At the end of these 2 presentations, and on the spur of the moment, a few remarks and comments will be made as food for thought for the ensuing debate, respectively, Dr. Werner Vaslavent, President of EURODEFENCE Austria, Dr. Ernest van Hoek, President of EURODEFENCE Netherlands, and Dr. António Figueiredo Lopes, President of EURODEFENCE Portugal. I am very enthusiastic and hopeful about the high importance and timeliness of this panel 3, and therefore I eagerly look forward to its findings and recommendations. So, I beg your indulgence to allow me to make just a few remarks before handing over the floor to our speakers. The internal and sometimes contended EU developments, the COVID pandemic effects, together with the global uncertainty of the new and ever-evolving European environment, the crises and security challenges accumulating in and around the EU, as well as the new European ambition of strategic autonomy, calling for the EU to become a global player, have created the sense of urgency required for the EU to be more responsible and resilient to stand up for all these threats and challenges, so as to protect its citizens and to defend its common values, principles, and interests. Furthermore, in the absence of a common strategic culture amongst the EU member states, and due to the largely intergovernmental character of the common foreign and security policy and common security and defense policy, asking for unanimity governing the cumbersome EU decision-making process, experience has shown that just pooling and sharing national capability, relying on the national political will, are no longer enough for the EU to be able to act fast and to respond swiftly to the global threats and operational related actions. Therefore, reforming, adapting, and strengthening the current EU defense organization, while increasing confidence in the ongoing variety of CSDP tools and initiatives, as well as pruning the decision-making process within the existing institutional legal framework is not a luxury anymore, but highly necessary and urgent. As a matter of fact, while European security and defense strategic interests obviously do not keep pace with everything of NATO, and the member states per se are not able to carry out the whole spectrum of missions demanded by the new EU level of ambition, a more cooperative, effective, and rapid response union is compulsory. That is what this panel 3 is all about, ladies and gentlemen. So, without further ado, I give the floor to General von Ramos. The floor is yours, General. You have up to 15 minutes at the most.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. It is really a pleasure for me to be here and to keep talking in my age. That is by itself a pleasure, and it is a pleasure to be with you. Well, I know that we are between here and the end, so I would like to raise questions. I'm going to be just to the point to raise some questions to debate later on. Well, we could spend all the afternoon discussing the context of the geopolitical context of Europe. Let's move to the essentials. Yeah, I think that the major challenge of today is to accommodate the rise of China without being caught in the Thucydides trap. This is the challenge. Yeah, history tells us that during the last 5 centuries, in 12 of 16 cases where a rising power challenged the present power, war was the result. Kissinger tells us that it is difficult, it is complicated, but we can coexist today because China is not only Communist Party, is also something different. China is also Confucius, the empire of the middle. So there is a difference over there. But look, China during the last times moved from being the empire of the middle, a territorial empire, to a naval one. In 2018, it overcame the United States in number of combat ships for the first time in history. For the first time in history. And then he made a naval parade that showed to the world to say, here we are. We don't have the same capacity of projecting power, but we have more capacity to occupy the sea. Quite a change. And if the 7 shipbuilders continue to produce, it will go from the 300 to 1,000 combat ships in 10 to 15 years. Quite a change. As a response, Esper the Secretary of Defense of the United States said at that time, we are going to increase our naval capacity with more aircraft carriers, smaller one, more flexible, with more offensive and combat submarines and naval power as such. So theoretically, my dear friends, this is the Thucydides gap already. So this is to be central. This is going to be central. At a time where the America is really weakened. After these very long wars, they spent $6.4 trillion. This is what Watson Institute tells us. And if you compare with China, this is 2 Silk Roads with opposite results. The United States is living without glory, and China is transforming the world. This is the situation right now. The United States needs time to recuperate. This is not me that I'm saying, it is Biden that said that. It needs time to recuperate and to come to react from a strength power later on. This is what they expect from Europe. They expect a solidarity in Europe. They expect that Europe is able to help them to have that time to reconstitute. So my argument is that I believe that this situation needs Europe in the equation. It needs the Europe, the power of multilateralism, the power of not the normative power, the power of discussion. The worst thing that could happen to Europe is if you had to opt for one or for the other. This is the challenge that we are facing today. So, what should I discuss today? Maybe 3 points, could be more. First, we need a cohesive transatlantic partnership. We need a stronger Europe, but capable of being a single actor. And we need a jump in our security and defense. We needed to move, finally, for a security and defense union. It is time for that. Why a cohesive and transatlantic partnership? What do I mean by that? I mean, the future is far from being settled in the United States. This can be just a small interval to be followed by an autocratic return in a couple of years. In 2 years' time, we will see what is going on. We will see. But what we know is if we succeed to have a transatlantic partnership based on democracy, we are helping Biden and democracy in the United States. That we know. We know also that if you get separated from the United States and China, we are just a piece, a land of competition between major powers. This is not that I said. It was the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the United States that said, a place of competition between major powers. In neocolonization, look what happened in Ukraine, and then in Georgia, and then in Moldova, and then in 16+1. What is that? In one of these days, it will be 17+1, and then 18+1, and then 20+1, and then European Union +1. To avoid that, we need to have a successful transatlantic partnership. And then we are able to stay in the middle as Europe. Because if you think on the foreign direct investment, 70% of the foreign direct investment of Europe is in the United States. And 60% of the investment of the United States in the world is in Europe. On our east, we have the major trade partner with China that Europe has. In that configuration, we are in the center, a bridge for peace, for cooperation. This is what we need, I think. We need to pass from a place of competition to a center of the geoeconomics in the world. but Europe needs to fulfill the expectations. The United States are looking at us and they are thinking, most of them are thinking, well, they have the same GNP as the United States. And then as the NATO Secretary General said, look, listen to me. He said that publicly many times. 80% of the Europeans live in a NATO country, but they pay 20% of the defense expenditures of NATO. He said that many times. We have to fulfill the expectations. So we, European Union, present to the United States a new agenda for global change in December. And in my transparent, I said, this is a good idea. This is a good idea to have a council. This is a good idea to have a security and defense dialogue. But we missed in our paper, in my opinion, that the summits that we have with the United States start with first photograph and finish with the last one, and it is over. We need content. We need a secretariat to follow. We need a program. And I'm very glad to say that all of that was agreed since December last year to today meeting of yesterday or 2 days ago meeting between the United States and the European Union. We have here a fresh start, my dear friends. We are here. We can be here in a new cycle that is going to start. This is our challenge in Europe. But then, my dear friends, we need a strong Europe that is a single actor. Look, the threat analysis that was done because of the strategic compass said that, and it is the sentence that is there. The challenges are truly daunting and can only be effectively solved working together, if you work together and if you provide a collective European response. This is the conclusion of our people. With all the information gathered from our countries, only together we can prevail. This is the challenge. But then our high representative went to Russia and Lavrov told him, European Union, just a carcass. You are an obstacle. We know very much of the differences between your countries and Russia. We are an obstacle on the relationship. That is the challenge. We have to act together. Without that, we will be just a piece of competition between major powers as we are in progressive neocolonization as we are today. And we need, how can we solve that? We need, for the first time, to look upstream. We are always looking downstream. I mean, the military should do this and that. We should decide by majority and so on and so on. No, we look to start upstream. We need to press the council to say what are our strategic interests. It is written in the Treaty of Lisbon. Never decided. What are our strategic interests and objectives? And that should produce a strategy at the global level that is able to unite the action of member states. Without that, we will continue to be a carcass. A carcass. So, my dear friends, that is a challenge. To think at that level, to unite us together, to finish the image of being an herbivorian in a world of carnivore, as the first minister of the foreign affairs of Germany told us some years ago. Finally, we need a security and defense union, in my opinion. Why? Because in this context, we need to be a responsible partner. First in Europe. We have to be clear now. In my opinion, territorial defense is a matter of NATO. But we have to produce much more. It is not about the 2%. This is a stupid approach, I think. It is about what we bring to NATO. And we have to bring half of NATO capabilities that are needed, roundly, not 20%. We have to improve that. We have to show it. Otherwise, NATO is going to be always judged a bad deal by the United States. And I tell you, there are many people in high levels of the administration and public and commonly that consider that NATO is a bad business for the United States. So in NATO, but then if you think about hybrid threats that are the top now, this is where the European Union should prevail because we have all the components that are needed. We have military power, we have economic power, social power, diplomacy, all the things that are needed to solve this campaign. So we should prevail in our relation with NATO on the hybrid threat. And we should be clear about that. As we should be clear about the southern flank. We have to do more. Yeah, we have to do more. Yes, I will finish. We have to do more. Do you know how many people we have outside from Europe in our southern flank? It is 5,000. 0.0.0.1 of our demographic power in Europe. This is nothing in a Europe with 1.2 million men in arms, spending $200 billion euros a year in defense. You have 5,000 people outside. We lost Libya. We lost Sahel. And the terrorism is going down. He achieved Mozambique as I was years ago. We need to help the world, to help the United States, making something better in Europe and more. We need more capacity, but last point, we need to Europeanize our critical defense projects. We need to be a cluster of Europe to produce. How come we come to this moment and the major projects are not in PESCO? I mean, the new aircraft is not there, new ship is not there, the new land forces platforms are not there. We need to Europeanize that. We need to buy equipment, to produce and to buy equipment together. It is not exclusive to NATO. Why should not we buy the Eurodrone together in Europe and to settle a unit of Europe? We need to think serious about that if you want to be a unit together. So this ends my 10 minutes on time, and I'll be ready for your questions about that. Thank you.
Thank you, General Fonteramos. As usual, your presentation was very interesting, concise, and up to date on how the EU, taking advantage of a rejuvenated and revitalized transatlantic partnership, can better define the common threats, challenges, and strategic objectives on the security and defense dimensions, and on how to foster greater European defense capability-driven cooperation, as well as on how the EU can better interact with NATO so as to demonstrate its capacity to deliver and to shape its identity as a security and defense union, as a provider and peace promoter. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Erik van Doorn. The floor is yours. You have 15 minutes at the most.
At the minimum.
At the minimum, okay. At the minimum.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President, for inviting me. Originally, there was a title, Working Group 27, Review and Follow-up. I will not go into all these recommendations. I presume you've read them. There are 11 recommendations, and it took us 2 years to agree or passively accept the consequences of these recommendations. They've been sent to the presidents of the Commission and Parliament, and they have been nationally distributed in a number of countries, I presume. And we have decided to continue the work on these recommendations and these issues. And that has just started. We start at the top, at policy making and decision making. In retrospect, the ideas and conclusions of the original paper were discussed, adapted, molded into acceptable diplomatic language and improved. But what happened at the same time was that people got used to these concepts because of the logic and realism. Let me give you examples. When we said Frontex might be an interesting example of personnel at EU level, there was a lot of hesitance and criticism and doubt. Right now, Frontex is operating with thousands of permanent staff, meets a lot of problems. We got a presentation by one of the top people at Frontex a couple of weeks ago. And the predictable problems, the problems he mentioned in operating Frontex at the EU level were predictable. But that doesn't matter, doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a Frontex. The same would count for any kind of operational unit at the EU level. But Frontex is there now, and 2 years ago, we very much doubted if that would be realized in a couple of years. Discussions about an EU intervention unit are held at this moment. People talk about it. A few years ago, this was dreaming. The need for an EU Security Council pops up on the agenda. The need for the strategic compass is very clear these days. And the issue of specialization of national forces by member states and the consequences of it is also on the table in my country, but in many other countries. Then we have the QMV question. And even the possibility of EU finance for EU defense projects, capital market finance. That's quite something. All these things were 2 or 3 years ago difficult to discuss, considered fantasies. We emphasize the need to do today what is required for the next decades and not what is required to make up for overdue maintenance and lost and neglected capacities and capabilities from the past. The future is the challenge. Reality can be more amazing than fantasy. And that sounds nice, sounds like a slogan, but I'm a development economist. And when I studied, I also studied the situation in China in, say, 75. And China didn't get any development aid, 2.7% development aid in those days. And China was like a lost situation under Mao. There was the Cultural Revolution. He even reduced his intellectual capabilities in the country. A lost country. And look at China today. We couldn't even dream about that, and it happened. So prepare for the unimaginable. If that happened in 50 years, think what could happen in the next 20 years. Interesting lesson from the past 2 or 3 years is that what was received with skepticism 2 years ago now is ongoing discussion and ongoing terminology. There are a few issues that hamper development of an EU security and defense policy and progress. One of them at the national level is always sovereignty. And sovereignty, I'm talking personally, sovereignty is a fallacy. Sovereignty is probably centuries ago for small countries that had all the resources they needed and could build a wall around them. You could say they had sovereignty for some time. But today, in the past 70 years, we were living under the NATO-US umbrella to protect ourselves. We're dividing tasks among ourselves. One did the cruise missiles, another did the maritime operations, develop new aircraft, do R&D. We relied on the AWACS, And we were relying on the NATO alliance under US leadership and US foreign policy influence. And we felt protected by Article 5 that actually doesn't oblige anyone to do anything. You're requested to do what you can do and what you want to do, but you have no obligation to do something. And all those years we were dependent on the alliance and accepted our reduced sovereignty and US political supremacy. The situation now has changed. The EU can become the new umbrella of our security and defense, and we are scared to lose we are scared at the same time to lose our sovereignty by delegating it to the EU that we control ourselves and that serves our own interests and foreign policy objectives. The interesting thing in this discussion about sovereignty is that the flip side of sovereignty is the need for specialization. Specialization was, at least in my country, and I presume in many other countries, a thing that you didn't like to discuss. We wanted to do everything from a defense point of view. And some things you could do better and others you couldn't. And there are maritime nations. They have maritime assets and capabilities. But generally speaking, specialization was not very popular. Now, specialization is an issue. In my country, in defense planning for the next 10, 15 years, specialization is an issue. And why? Because we realize that doing a few things very well is better than doing everything 40%. But that means the consequence of specialization is this so-called loss of sovereignty. If you do something good and someone else does the other thing good, then you have shared sovereignty, as President Macron would have said. And you delegate your sovereignty. And that's the consequence of specialization. You depend on each other. And it's 1 and 1 is 3, but at the same time, it's not your 3, it's the 3 of the group. Another thing is, an important lesson is the need for international credibility. What I want to say is this. In today's and tomorrow's world, there is one important lesson. Your international influence is not so much determined by the amount spent on defense, say 2% of BNP, or your capabilities and capacities, even if you spent $1 trillion, like the US. But what counts is the willingness and preparedness to actually successfully defend your interests, be it diplomatically or militarily. The reason why our working group are involved in this follow-up is the importance of political and decision-making procedures in the EU. And if the EU wants to show that it is prepared to defend its interests, it also has to have the right decision-making procedures and capabilities to do that. It has to formulate a foreign policy. That foreign policy could be A, global power projection, forcing its interests on the rest of the world. B, be a global player promoting rule of law, an organized world order, and prepared to defend its interests by all means available, protecting its citizens, protecting its preferred way of life, protecting its global supply lines, availability of raw materials, etc., etc. And C, doing nothing. Of course, the EU should take A. Global compass should show us the threats we can expect. The next step is how to prepare ourselves for these threats. First, by formulating a policy, a foreign and S&D policy. We're in that process. Next, by organizing effective EU decision-making. Here the Frontex example is interesting because the general in that told me his experiences about Frontex in the past 12 months. He said, what we continuously meet, the problem we continuously meet is that we cannot get quick decisions from the top. But he's in the field, he needs quick decisions. And the third step is by having the institutions, capabilities, and capacities to execute these policy decisions and give guidance and set priorities to member states in the process of specialization. What about all the ongoing initiatives and programs like PESCO and all the others? This is not against the things I've said. The EU has always functioned like that. It always started with initiatives at the bottom and working upward, and in the meantime, hoping that a miracle would happen. And it always happened like that. So let's keep on doing it. And at the same time, top down, try to make an umbrella to make it all fit together. What is an important thing is, let's not be afraid to establish ambitious goals for collective and effective EU defense in the coming decades. Dreaming, this is not dreaming, it's realistic, urgent, and unavoidable. As I told you, you could say that the development of China is a nightmare. It's also a kind of dreaming. No one could have dreamt what happened there in 50 years. But who in 1946 would have dreamt that we now have a European Union? It was a completely unrealistic proposal if you would have said that in 1950 or 1960. I think we should continue thinking like that and have these set ambitious goals. One of the things we urgently need is qualified majority voting. In our recommendations, we have explained that one unanimous decision by the Council within the treaty can make that possible. But if we have to change treaties, so be it. If a large majority of member states accepts a certain EU strategy, then the small minority should abstain, refrain, or possibly even exit. In today's world, it is not possible that a union of member states that has already unified most aspects of life is not able to conduct a credible foreign and security and defense policy towards the rest of the world. Once fundamental policy decisions at the EU level have been taken, we can start working top down, creating and developing the institutions that we have recommended, such as a Security Council, the Defense Council, an EU intervention force, the so-called blue badges. And among the multitude of multidimensional threats, there are a number that will require a military response. Scenarios will have to be developed, what to do at the EU level, what capabilities and capacities will be required, how to organize it, how to finance it, how to adapt national defense efforts, how to find the right formula for military and civil cooperation in each member state. A, as the French say, mer à voir, and a lot to do for Working Group 27B, but we look forward to it. And last but not least, if we can have a clear EU foreign and security and defense policy and the required instruments, we can be much more effective in our cooperation with associated countries and NATO. If our interests overlap, and often they do, we must certainly team up with our partners on the basis of strengths and independence. Finally, we may even reach a moment that an American president actually has the phone number of the EU.
Thank you, Dr. Eric. Well done. Just on time.
Okay.
Thank you for your interesting and very informative overview on how to promote much needed European common strategic culture and on how to reform, adapt, and overcome the stumbling blocks of the current European defense architecture within the existing legal framework towards a more integrated, strengthened, and credible Europe of defense as a global player. However, by and large, it also matters a lot to know both how to move forward to persuade member states to giving up some sovereignty against specialization, and at the same time, changing the unanimity decision-making, which is a real, actual stumbling block.
Absolutely.
And how the proposed new strength European Defence Organization will interlink with the forward-looking NATO 2030 agenda in what concerns a new EU-NATO division of labor between the two organizations, while keeping up with the principles of cooperation, coherence, complementarity, and mutual reinforcing in the context of ensuring our collective defense. Now, I'm pleased to kindly invite the distinguished presidents, Dr. Werner, Dr. Ernest, and Dr. Antonio, in this sequence, to make some reflections and highlights on the subject and the discussion as food for thought for the ensuing open debate. The floor is yours, gentlemen. You have 5 minutes each. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to congratulate our two speakers for their outstanding presentations. I fully agree. And I just would like maybe to add a few thoughts. I agree absolutely with General Ramos when he says, okay, the big challenge is and will be China, because it is changing the world in every respect, and with the dynamic that we have to define ourselves in a new way. Everybody, from the Americans to the smallest country in Africa, everybody will have to define himself in a new way. And of course, this is not so much a question now of a military engagement, but it is the question, it's a systemic question. And this systemic question, General Ramos answered in the way that he said, okay, united together, fighting for freedom of navigation, fighting for humanitarian rights, for our value and Western rules-based global order. This is our interest. And this is the highest interest. And I just want to add one aspect. Of course, it's not only in theory, but also on the ground. You have to know when there is a Chinese claim on the South China Sea, this is a claim of more than 300 million square kilometers, where they more or less want to handle it as a territory, as their own territory. And this means, of course, that free navigation would be endangered in this case. And also that all the cables that go through from Japan or from South Korea down to India or to Africa or to Australia and so on, are under control of China. This is clear. Yeah. And insofar, this is not a question just for the Americans or for the Japanese and the Indians or Australians, but it is also a question for Europe. We have to be clear. Therefore, I also think that demonstrations for free navigation that are made by the French, by the British, and sometimes even from the Dutch, by the Dutch, you know, a little bit. But even if it is only a signal, it is important. That's what I think. But I say, I would say, and I would add, this is not all of our strategic interests. We have a common, more or less common strategic interest on the global order, common between Europe and the United States. But in addition, we also have a regional strategic interest of highest importance for Europe that we do not share with the Americans, or what the Americans do not share with the Europeans. What do I mean? The whole situation in Eastern Europe. I mean, I just mentioned Belarus, Oblast Kaliningrad, Ukraine, Caspian region, and. This is one whole mess, Eastern Europe. And if you look to the south, it's the same. In Northern Africa and in the Middle East. And when you ask in this situation, where is Europe? You have to answer, nowhere. I mean, if I go, I don't know, in the Caspian region, it is a question between Russia and Turkey. When you go to Belarus, it's a question of Russia and nobody else, because everyone thinks there's a Putin's double mirror. If you go to Moldova, there's hardly any role, okay? If you go to Libya, it's a question between the Russians and the Turks. If you go to Syria, it's a question of the Russians and the Iranians and the Israelis, and you can continue. And so far, we have to ask the question, is it really our interest that the whole Europe encircling region, our whole neighborship is shaped politically, strategically by more or less regional powers, and European Union is completely outside of the business. There is no business. I mean, sometimes we talk
5,000 people.
Minsk process that in reality does not exist, you know? But this is all. But already the question whether we should deliver armament to Ukraine is something that doesn't exist, because there is no common European policy. And we have to be aware that, of course, America will not engage in those regions because their main interest is the Chinese challenge. And they have to concentrate. They have wasted already at least 2 decades in the Middle East instead of concentrating on the main question. And therefore, we have to handle this more or less autonomously, maybe with the help of the Americans, but the initiative must be with the Europeans. That's what I see. And therefore, it is so important, you know, to further development of autonomous European security and defense policy. That's what I see. So, where are the problems? You spoke it out already, you know. I would say from different dimensions, it's not the money. It's not the money. First of all, it is shaping political will. This is the hardest challenge that we have. And the second one maybe is also shaping or getting the necessary experience for a hard power. Because everything we are doing is, you know, in the last decades, we are producing tons of papers, but where is really our action? I mean, a little bit Mali, a little bit Chad, and maybe in the future, a little bit Mozambique is not everything. You have to be aware that if you are out of practice, you are out of business. Okay, and therefore I would say we should try to work on it. What I see is, you know, that everything that will strengthen the shaping of a common European will, and also that will bring effective practice, not only papers, but real steps. Hard power means real steps, means real measures, not in theory. That's what I mean. On the ground, that's what we need. And therefore, I think we really have to back all those initiatives. And what I see is especially to have one strategic center in Brussels that tries to overlook it, to set the priorities is so important.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon.
I need a microphone.
Yeah, I'll pass it.
Okay,
Speaks by itself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for these interesting presentations and considerations so far. Let me start a little bit with the considerations from Mr. Ramos about the various numbers of maritime forces of China and the United States. I'd like to go back a little bit in history, a bit of history in the Netherlands. You think of the Netherlands as one nation state, but it wasn't always that way. Some 1200 years ago, there happened to be conflicts between the province of Holland and what was later known as the province of Friesland. And the Battle of Warns involved some 1200 ships, most of them from Holland, but they were beaten by the Frisians. Nevertheless, that didn't prevent ultimately from the whole set of provinces, the 17 united or later on 7 united provinces, to come together when in time of need, it was clear that no one could survive on its own. And sounds perhaps strange, but we have to thank Spain for that, to push us into that unification movement, creating the province, the Republic of the 7 united provinces. A very funny phenomena at the time, because nobody was a republic anymore. That was way back in the time of the Romans and the Greeks. But anyway, we became a republic in those days. And only later on, with the help of the French, we returned to be a kingdom, which only proves that things are relative sometimes. Another example of the play of numbers, it's a little bit back again, we are now in the 17th, 16th century. The Armada moved up to teach the lessons to what is now the United Kingdom and now the Netherlands. They were a multitude of ships, much more than both of us together had. Nevertheless, because conviction, perhaps superior tactics, I'm not a judge of that, but we prevailed in the end. This goes just to show that history moves from uniting small units into larger ones. And I think that is typically what we see in Europe these days. The phenomena that we call a nation state is a relatively new one. It goes back, let's say, to the 18th century somewhere and was built on in the 19th century. I think we have to realize, and some people do that already more or less, that perhaps a nation state is not the ultimate answer either. We live in a world of large blocks, one block being clearly the United States, a creation from European philosophy, by the way. Especially the French played a role in setting up its constitution. And I think my own country helped in financing that typical revolutionary movement. It shows that single nation states can no longer carry on as if they were king of the world. They are not. Neither is any European nation state anymore able to protect the totality of our population, our resources, and our cultural heritage. Talking about heritage and cultural habit, I think it is clear that we can conclude nowadays that the United States has been and perhaps still is, the #1 power in the world. But will it stay that way? These days already, the European Union has bypassed the United States as a settler of rules about commerce, about juridical systems, a lot of other things as well. So you can look to Europe as a power, a commercial power, but also as a setter of norms, which is, when we talked about cyber and about energy, are typical elements that are deciding in which system in the end will prevail. And I think we have to be proud as Europeans to be able to do that because we cooperate. In that same light, I think we see with Frontex that was mentioned earlier, when we look at the anti-piracy actions in let's say close to Africa, yes, we can do a lot of things if we pull our things together. And what it takes these days, I think, is let your imagination run free and think about a military defense power that Europe can be. And only if we all believe it and we work to it, it will happen someday. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to start by thanking the moderator, his friend, General Bushner Correa, former Vice President of EURODEFENCE Portugal, and the speakers. I am very impressed about the accuracy and the substance of your statements. We have been very impressive, General Trump calling our attention for this geopolitical challenge that we are confronting, as well as dealing with the new tentative to clarify how we can build up a new Europe of defense. At the end, I am very grateful also to my colleagues, Ernst and Luke in the General because they have been complementing with their remarks what we were expecting from this important time. Your excellent contributions, everyone, did help us to give, in a certain sense, to be subject the EURODEFENCE hallmark. We are used to deal with complex problems with a great and comprehensive manner. I think it is a good way of putting the things with this clarification. Our fundamental aim with these debates, as I did mention yesterday, is to get the message across. I think it is our aim of the EURODEFENCE associations and EURODEFENCE network. And we have to be very clear in saying that we are really confronting with the increasing and very complex challenge, geopolitical challenge and threats. And for that, we need a greater cooperation and perhaps a better integration or more integration. And I want to speak about perceptions. I think we need new perceptions about our common interests. It is our subject, and we look at our we put there, we have to comment, to develop the culture of defense and the perception of the common interests. I think it is important for the policymakers to have this support from the people. If we find a way to pass the message, especially to the younger generations, they are the leaders of the future, that there are common interests that we only could protect together and in a cooperative form, it will be better, and especially to pass the message that it is with a stronger Europe
can deal with this new challenge and not with less Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Werner, Dr. Ernest, and Dr. Antonio, for your brilliant and profound reflections based on your huge practical experience and knowledge in dealing with the complexities, the stumbling blocks, and the decision-making related bureaucracies of the European security and defense. In its endeavors to stand up for the common values and interests. Do you still have time for?
Yes, we could. If there are some, we could have minutes. Yes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the floor now is open for questions. Are there any questions, please? Okay, please.
Patricia knows the answers.
If we come back to the story, this is bad news because for the United States there was the secession war. I learned recently that in Switzerland there was a war to get united. There was a war. I learned that very recently. And there was almost a war against France. So, but I think our objective is not that war.
We should avoid that.
I have read a book on French. We have different strategy and culture. And I should say that officers, military, and diplomats have certitudes. They are sure that they have the right way, and the right way is sovereignty. The question is how we will change the way of thinking of the each nation, military, and diplomats, because they do not want to change. And he said it takes 2 different generations to just train the young officers and the young diplomats to change the world. So perhaps the problem is that according to me, it will take 40 years to change the mind of the diplomats and the military and the politicians. But perhaps we will not have 40 years time to get united. But I can present you this one officer and explain how we could change. Because we know the fact, the problem is that we do not know how to change. I think the nation states will never abandon the sovereignty alone. They will not decide to give that. They have to be obliged. This is my point. But I can present you, I can give you, it is in French, encourage you to so change the culture, military, and people of our days.
Thank you very much. Any reaction?
On the small reaction, because we have the cars, because I forgot that.
Okay. Well, I have 2 remarks. It's as a conscript in the Dutch army a long time ago, typically during the Cold War and during the Cuba crisis. It was surprising how I was molded in becoming a soldier rapidly. In 6 to 12 months, everything that happened I considered normal, which it not always was. It's the machinery works. That's the first. If you at the EU level start training people and developing cultures, you develop your own culture and your own habits. The second thing is, do you think that being a military, an officer in Vladivostok or in St. Petersburg, that these have the same cultures, these people, or people in Maine and Alabama, and they're completely different cultures, especially Maine and Alabama. I can tell you that. And still they're in the same army because the same army is the mold. And So setting up a new EU defense organization gradually and adapting that with the national capabilities may also be a way to accelerate the process of, how should we call it, unnationalization.
Yeah. Now it's a reaction from General.
Yeah, just two points. I think that we should treat the security and defense system as we treated the economic system, with a win-win approach. If we do not Europeanize the production, we will not having a win-win. We will have always big powers to win and the others feeling that they are losing. That's why I defend that. If we succeed in the economy, it is the same principle in security defense. We have to open. You have to open the market. We have to feel really like a cluster, the European cluster. Otherwise, we will always be small pieces that think they are crucial and independent and so on and so on. This is the first thing. And second thing is we are a club with rules and interests. If you don't define the interests, anyone can do whatever they want to do. But it is in the treaty that the council have to decide what are the strategic interests. The parliament for years is asking us to define them. This is the way for us to stay together. If you are out of the strategic interests, you are out of the club. If you don't have that feeling, we will not progress. That's why I defend that the 22nd article of the treaty has to be fulfilled by the council. And it is upstream. If you don't sort out that there, I mean, we are always having a half strategy. Solana had a half strategy because it starts with threats. Those are our threats. This is what we should do. Today is the same. That is not a strategy. Is a strategy. What do we want to achieve? Where do we want to go? And then you get prepared to do that. We are missing that in Europe without reason. Simply because the council did not decide it yet, but we have to pull them. And this present discussion on Europe in my university, which is the Catholic University, our point is that big nations decide what you want to do. Do you want to be in the club? What are in our club for what? Just to sell and buy? We are something more than that. We have values. We have principles. And those principles have to be transformed in what the treaty tells us that they should do. Define the strategic interests and objectives of the European Union. And then things will go around bit by bit, I think, and I hope.
Thank you, General von Schrems. Okay, time is up now. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all, our speakers and commentators, in particular for your active and fruitful participation in this panel. So, ladies and gentlemen, the session is now adjourned. My best wishes for you to have a good day and enjoy being in this marvelous city of Lisbon.